Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli Prime Minister invites the Palestinian president to speak at the Knesset. Syria slams Israel for defending itself, and Russia has new reasons to cooperate with Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk here with the latest news in the Holy Land. The Israeli Prime Minister has extended an unprecedented invitation to the president of the Palestinian Authority, asking him to address Israel's parliament known as the Knesset.
I believe that for that border peace to be fully achieved, the Palestinians have to be part of it. I'm ready to begin negotiations to achieve this today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. President Abbas spoke here an hour ago. Wouldn't it be better if instead of speaking past each other, we were speaking to one another? President Abbas, instead of railing against Israel at the United Nations in New York, I invite you to speak to the Israeli people at the Knesset in Jerusalem. And I would gladly come to speak to the Palestinian parliament in Ramallah.
Netanyahu's invitation came during a speech to the 71st United Nations General Assembly on Thursday, just minutes after Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas spoke and accused Israel of avoiding peace negotiations.
تحاول إسرائيل اليوم التهرب من المؤتمر الدولي للسلام الذي اقترحته فرنسا وأجمعت عليه غالبية دول العالم، وانعقد اجتماع في باريس من أجل التحضير له شاركت فيه 28 دولة و3 منظمات دولية، والذي نأمل أن يفضي لوضع آلية وسقف زمني محدد لإنهاء الاحتلال وفق قرارات الشرعية الدولية ومبدأ الأرض مقابل السلام ومبادرة السلام العربية التي تنص أيضاً على حل عادل ومتفق عليه لقضية اللاجئين حسب القرار 194، آملين من جميع دول العالم دعم عقد المؤتمر الدولي للسلام قبل نهاية هذا العام. وهنا نتساءل، إذا لم يكن هناك مؤتمر دولي للسلام ولا مفاوضات مباشرة بيننا وبين الإسرائيليين، فكيف يصنع السلام؟ لا مؤتمر دولي ولا مفاوضات ويتحدثون عن السلام، كيف يمكن أن يصنعوا السلام؟
The Israeli Prime Minister says that Israel is very much interested in reaching a peace agreement, so long as it's made through direct bilateral talks and without the interference of international parties. It's for this very reason that the Israeli leader has invited Abbas to speak directly to the Knesset.
I believe, as never before, that changes taking place in the Arab world today offer a unique opportunity to advance that peace. I commend President Sisi of Egypt for his efforts to advance peace and stability in our region. Israel welcomes the spirit of the Arab Peace Initiative and welcomes a dialogue with Arab states to advance a broader peace. I believe that for that border peace to be fully achieved, the Palestinians have to be part of it. I'm ready to begin negotiations to achieve this today, not tomorrow, not next week, today.
The Palestinians have already rejected Netanyahu's invitation, calling it a gimmick designed to mask Israel's disinterest in moving forward with a peace deal. Yet both Netanyahu and Abbas's speeches at the United Nations last week have presented starkly different views of the path necessary to revive peace talks. Netanyahu is rejecting a settlement freeze, the division of Jerusalem and the 1967 borders as a basis for talks, all of which the Palestinian leader has listed as preconditions to going back to the negotiating table. Abbas is also demanding the United Kingdom to apologize for its 1917 declaration, which endorsed the founding of a Jewish homeland in what was then the state of Palestine.
ولذلك ندعو بريطانيا وفي الذكرى المئوية لهذا الوعد المشؤوم، هذه الصفقة المشؤومة، أن تستخلص العبر والدروس وأن تتحمل المسؤولية التاريخية والقانونية والسياسية والمادية والمعنوية لنتائج هذا الوعد، بما في ذلك الاعتذار من الشعب الفلسطيني لما حل به من نكبات ومآس وظلم، وتصحيح هذه الكارثة التاريخية ومعالجة نتائجها، على الأقل بالاعتراف بالدولة الفلسطينية. هذا ما هو مطلوب من بريطانيا بعد هذا الذي ارتكبته بحق الشعب الفلسطيني.
The Palestinian president wants Great Britain to recognize Palestine as a state, but the Israeli prime minister says that recognition of a Palestinian state cannot question or threaten the existence of a Jewish one.
Ladies and gentlemen, Israel is ready, I am ready, to negotiate all final status issues. But one thing I will never negotiate: our right to the one and only Jewish state.
Israeli-Palestinian peace talks collapsed in 2014, and there's little hope that they will resume anytime soon. Israel is accusing Palestinian violence and incitement of impeding any hope for peace, especially since a renewed wave of Palestinian terror has started up over the last week. The Palestinians are accusing Israel of impeding negotiations by continuing to expand settlements in the occupied land where the Palestinians want to establish a state, but Israel has denied these allegations. In his speech to the United Nations, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu didn't only focus on how Israel is often criticized by the UN. He also mentioned how the Jewish state has managed to develop profound friendships with lots of new nations. Joining us today in the studio to tell us more is Knesset member Sharon Haskel, who is also a member of the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. Thanks so much for coming in.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So we know that you're personally in charge of maintaining diplomatic relations with quite a challenging region for Israel, South America. Can you tell us about what you do?
Yeah, I'll just touch in a point the speech, because that has a strong connection to what I do in the areas of South America as well. And this speech was different than other speeches because it brought hope. Didn't just brought hope for Israel that things are about to change at the UN, but also hope for the entire Middle East, that things are changing at this point in time, that things will become better and better because we are strengthening friendships and building and creating an amazing bond with those countries around us. And that brings hopes. On another aspect about my work in South America, hope is very much needed there as well. And I'll tell you, I was very disappointed. I visited there. I returned from a delegation last week to see how we can strengthen our friendship and our relationship with Chile. I'm the head of the friendship group between Israel and Chile, and one of my jobs are to see in what ways we can strengthen that. And there's a deep problem there, that instead of creating hope in Chile, where there's one of the biggest community of Palestinians that are living outside of the Middle East, a lot of them are located in Chile. Instead of showing how the Jewish community and the Palestinian community can live side by side. The Palestinian community have exported the conflict to Chile. And you can see a very strong Palestinian lobby, Palestinian student association, Palestinian football group there as well. And how much propaganda and lies they are spreading about Israel, about the Jewish community in that country.
It's very interesting. Now, I understand that in the beginning of this trip you received a negative reaction from some parliament members in Chile itself. You received a letter. Tell us about what happened.
Well, 16 parliament members, while most of them are from Palestinian origin, condemned our visit, tried to prevent us from meeting ministers and officials. But I can tell you that our answer was that those meetings were in fact happening, that many of the ministers and high officials in the foreign ministry, in the agricultural ministry, etc., were meeting us. We met with the chairman of their parliament, where we were very much accepted in a warm and very warm and accepting way.
Okay. Now, I understand that there's been increased activity by Islamist terror groups in South America, supported and funded by Iran, and not only in Chile, but also, bordering Argentina, Paraguay, Brazil. Why has this been happening? Why are we seeing this increase of, Islamist military presence?
Well, unfortunately, this is one of the problems that we've got with Iran, where it's trying to spread its tentacles to every corner around the world. This is a global problem. I mean, this is a problem that the world is facing today. We're facing it here in the Middle East, and I hope it will not come to a reality, or South America has to face the same reality that we're facing today in the Middle East, where Iran is selling weapons, and sending money to militant groups, to terrorist organizations, to try and take over certain parts, to spread their extremist point of view upon our values and our societies. And you can see there's about now 40 centers that Iran has now as points in South America, and that's quite dangerous. They've got even military training there. They're spreading propaganda through there.
But why is South America, so prone to this happening?
Why is it so prone? I think it's a little bit under the radar. There's less activity of international organizations or law enforcement. It's very much open for that. Not to say that, the borders towards the United States starts from there. And when they have more of a reality where they can operate freely without detection over there, and the trip is much shorter towards North America. I can tell you that even in Canada there was a huge problem, where there was one of their biggest centers in Canada. And they are facing this problem as well. They're fighting that too. I mean, these are centers of Hezbollah. These are centers of Iran. Some of them are undercovered by Islamic cultural centers. But it's easy enough just to go on their Facebook to see what kind of propaganda they're spreading through there against Western values, against the values that we live by, democratic values, freedom of individuals, equality. This is what they're fighting against, and it's quite worrying.
So, you obviously faced some initial difficulties when you went to Chile, but afterwards it seems like you had a pretty positive experience in terms of enhancing Israel's diplomatic relationship with Chile. What does the future hold for Israel, Israel's diplomatic status in South America?
Well, we are trying to strengthen the ties with many countries, especially with Chile. I mean, Chile is an economical power in South America. That's firstly. It's one of the most stable countries around this area as well. So it's very important for us to see how we can strengthen our relationships. I think there's a lot of things that they can benefit from what Israel's exporting and its technology, and we can also benefit from many things that Chile exports as well. with that, we do face some challenges. And the challenges are the propaganda that the Palestinian Chilean communities are spreading there. Some of it is complete lies. I went there on a delegation with a member of parliament as well. I'm the head of the delegation, and he was associated to the delegation. He's a member of the friendship group, and he's in the opposition. He's from the left wing, actually quite extreme left wing. And in the newspapers, the Palestinian lobby has said that they just turned him into this extreme right-wing activist. They called him heading the invasion to the Sinai, you know? And so I think this is the biggest challenge we are facing now in Chile. It's how to bring the truth out there, because so much of the propaganda and lies has been spread through this Palestinian lobby. And instead of creating a model, how Jews and Palestinians can live side by side in Chile, it gives me a little bit less hope about the situation even here. If they can't do it, how are we meant to do it?
Absolutely. Well, we can only hope that, through your work and the continued work of Israeli officials going to South America to meet these people on the ground, we can enhance Israel's relationship with these South American countries like Chile.
I think that a lot of our achievement as well has done it. We were able to build some stronger relationships. We are in a process now to bring back the free trade agreement and a few other agreements that the Palestinian lobby has been trying to postpone. And I do see a brighter future and a stronger bond between Israel and Chile.
Well, economic ties lead to better friendships, right?
Absolutely.
So, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks a lot for inviting me.
The Israeli Prime Minister has just had his last meeting with U.S. President Barack Obama and is now speaking out to Israeli media about the future of America's role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Netanyahu has been repeating his appeal for U.S. President Barack Obama to abstain from advancing any kind of activity that hasn't been coordinated with Israel during the last months of Obama's presidency. It's believed the White House may push a Security Council resolution to pressure Israel into supporting Palestinian statehood efforts. The Palestinians say they will bring such a bill to the forum in October, but Netanyahu is rejecting the move and has quoted a speech Obama himself gave to the UN in 2011, saying that peace is not made through UN resolutions. Jerusalem has long insisted that peace can only be achieved through negotiations between the two sides. Netanyahu also met with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in New York on Friday after his meeting with Obama. Afterwards, a top American diplomat said there are things the administration believes can be accomplished over the next few months to protect the two-state solution as well as Israel's long-term security. Kerry later joined the other leaders of the Middle East Quartet made up of the UN, Russia, the EU, and the United States in urging Israel and the Palestinians to create conditions to restart meaningful negotiations towards a two-state solution. For the Israelis, they said that means a halt to settlement construction, and for the Palestinians, it means an end to the resurgence of violence against Israelis. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu heads home to Israel tonight, but before going to the airport, he's taking time to meet with both Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton and her Republican rival Donald Trump. According to senior Israeli sources, both appointments were only scheduled in the last 24 hours. The prime minister will first hold talks with Trump Sunday morning local time, followed by a meeting with Clinton this afternoon. The consultations come just one day before the two presidential candidates hold their first highly anticipated televised debate. Even though it appears the Trump campaign asked to meet with the Israeli leader, Netanyahu's staff then arranged the Clinton talks to avoid any appearance of bias. Israel's policy during the 2016 race has been the maintenance of absolute balance, most likely due to a fallout over the perception the premier favored Republican nominee Mitt Romney over incumbent President Barack Obama back in 2012. Both of today's meetings will be closed to the press. Meanwhile, there have been reports that are likely to gain Netanyahu's favor, that David Friedman, who's a Republican candidate's advisor on Israeli affairs, believes Trump would support the Israeli annexation of parts of Judea and Samaria, and would likely back a complete annexation of the West Bank if Israel thought it necessary. There's also a video of Friedman saying that Israel's Jewish character wouldn't be affected by such a move, because the Jewish majority would remain intact even after the absorption of 1.7 million Palestinians who live in the territory. Over the course of the last year, the Russian president has hosted the Israeli prime minister 3 times in Moscow, and it's appeared as though Russia is attempting to play a larger role in solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But what are Russia's true motives in becoming closer with the Jewish state? The Israeli prime minister says there are many. Netanyahu spoke about Russia's interest in collaborating with Israel at a discussion organized by the New York-based think tank Hudson Institute in New York City on Thursday. The Israeli leader believes Russia is deeply concerned about protecting itself from Islamist terrorism.
I think Russia has variegated interests. The first interest is to make sure that militant Islam doesn't penetrate and destabilize Russia. There are many millions of Muslims in Russia, including in greater Moscow. I think it's up to 2 million. And the concern that Russia has, which many other countries have, is that these populations would be radicalized. And so I think that explains part, not all, but part of what Mr. Putin is doing in Syria. I think they'd like to cut it at the source, as do others. Obviously, the United States would like to do it, and the other countries that are participating in the coalition. The first thing is block militant Islam at its source, and especially the Daesh phenomenon. For that, they make strange alliances.
Russian forces have been fighting alongside Iranian and Lebanese Hezbollah guerrillas in an attempt to keep Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in power. Putin's army has essentially guaranteed that Israel's 3 largest enemies will not attack the Jewish state from the north, but Israel can also promise Russia restraint in Syria. The Israeli prime minister has even met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow to ensure that both nations avoid a clash with one another, especially in the air.
I said we can actually have our forces shoot down each other's planes. I think a few weeks later something happened to that effect, but not with Israel. Or we can avoid it. So periodically we have to sort of tighten the bolts, because not everything that is said at the top necessarily reaches the bottom levels, the field levels. They do on the Israeli side, but they don't necessarily always do so on the other side. So the second thing is we want to avoid a clash. What is Mr. Putin's interest? He definitely doesn't want to have that happen.
Russia maintains a strategic Mediterranean base in Syria and has long demonstrated an interest in playing a larger role in neighboring Israel, where peace negotiations are at a standstill. Netanyahu hasn't shot down the idea, but hasn't necessarily endorsed it either. It looks like Israel is being condemned for a whole new reason. The Syrian foreign minister is accusing the Jewish state of being too aggressive in its retaliation against a mortar fire that has sporadically hit Israeli territory from the Syrian border. Israel holds the Assad regime responsible for any attacks on its sovereignty and responds to all violence spilling over its shared border with Syria, which obviously angers Damascus. Israel has been carrying out airstrikes in southern Syria to retaliate against errant fire. Even though Syrian President Bashar al-Assad failed to join other world leaders at the UN this past week, he sent his foreign minister Walid Mualem to represent Syria. Mualem is calling Israel's strikes acts of aggression that threaten not only his country but the whole region. The Arab diplomat even added in the incredulous claim that such retaliation actually helps terrorist organizations operating in the area. His allegations come just as Syria's main opposition coalition is accusing the world of failing to stop the Assad regime and its Russian allies from carrying out atrocities in Aleppo. At least 50 residents of Aleppo were killed yesterday alone in what's been some of the heaviest bombings since the civil war broke out in 2011. The opposition in exile says that Damascus and Moscow are massacring civilians with chemical weapons, barrel bombs, and the razing of entire buildings, while the world does nothing. Meanwhile, Israel, which lies just over the border, continues to help thousands of Syrians fleeing the bloodshed. The Jewish state treats the wounded at field hospitals in the Golan Heights, as well as in its own prestigious medical facilities. Israeli aid groups are also providing humanitarian supplies to Syrian refugees who are managing to make their way abroad, to Greece, Serbia, and elsewhere. You may even remember earlier ILTV reports about a website called Thank You People of Israel, set up by 39-year-old Syrian refugee Abu Dandachi, that includes personal stories of how Jerusalem and Jews worldwide have stepped in to help the displaced. And now it's time for our Hebrew word of the day. This weekend, almost every Israeli home tuned in to listen to the Prime Minister's speech at the United Nations. So today's word is ne'um, which means speech in Hebrew. They say a good speech should not just be the sharing of information, but a sharing of ourselves. And in many senses, that's true, since a ne'um is often a mirror of the soul. After all, your words often represent who you are. So make sure to first learn the meaning of your ne'um before you say it out loud. A great ne'um is literature, and if it's done right, it can change lives and the future of our world. Just make sure to take every ne'um with a grain of salt, because as politician Abraham Lincoln once said, when I get ready to talk to people, I spend 2/3 of the time thinking about what they want to hear and just 1/3 thinking about what I want to say. Chew on that. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. It's the beginning of a new week. Monday is expected to be partly cloudy with a high of 84 degrees. The temperature is expected to drop down to 82 on Tuesday. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.76 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to check out our evening update every night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching, and see you tonight.